Hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. This is an educational channel where we look at all kinds of things that you probably haven't heard of before. But if you did, and if you do, might benefit your life, might help you to have a different perspective about things. I look at mainly people who spent their whole life working on something, developing something, coming up with something outside of the box, but never really got recognized in their lifetime. Uh, and kind of the poster child for this is Dewey B. Larson. This is the 180th video that we've done on Dewey B. Larson and his reciprocal system of theory. And the basic idea behind the reciprocal system of theory is that we live in a universe of motion. It is not a universe made out of matter. It's not a universe made out of energy. It is a universe made out of motion. And motion is the relationship between space and time. So that sets up a generalized reciprocal relationship between space and time. You can think of motion as a fraction with space and time as the numerator and time or space as the denominator. But it is a bit more complicated than that because time and space both come in 1, 2, 3, or even more dimensions. And this is what Larson calls coordinate space and coordinate time. We understand coordinate space, x, y, z coordinates, 3 dimensions of time or space, 3 independent dimensions 90 degrees apart. But time also has those same qualities. And then we also have what Larson calls clock time and clock space. This is a scalar motion, a motion that has a magnitude but has no particular direction, which you visualize using a balloon and a magic marker that you put dots on the balloon. You blow up the balloon, all of the dots are moving away from each other, and but they're not moving in any particular direction. You suck in the balloon, they're all moving toward each other as an inward scalar motion, as opposed to the outward scalar motion and blowing up the balloon. And this we see in time. Time is always getting later and later and later and later, but in no particular direction. And in the same way, space is always getting farther and farther and farther apart, but in no particular direction. And that was seen by the Hubble telescope back in the 1920s. When they observed the recession of the distant galaxies. All of the galaxies are moving away from each other, almost as if they were on the surface of a balloon, or even the interior of the balloon, if you'd like to use an analogy of visualization, using raisin bread instead of the balloon. Also, time and space both come in only discrete units. There's a minimum unit of time and a minimum unit of space, and exactly one unit of space in 1 unit of time is the speed of light. The speed of light is therefore the background or the midpoint or the origin of the universe. And we have half of the universe that moves slower than the speed of light, which Larson calls the material sector, which is well known to science. And then there is the cosmic sector, which is the half of the universe that is moving faster than the speed of light, where the speed of light is actually the minimum speed of the universe. And that universe is largely unknown to science. But Larson, through his reciprocal system, is able to tap in and understand that half of the universe because it is an exact mirror image of the material sector, all you have to do is reverse the roles of space and time, and you have exactly what's going on in the cosmic sector, is exactly what's going on in the material sector with the roles of space and time reversed. Now, we're looking at his book called Nothing But Motion that he wrote in 1979. And this is the first of 3 volumes that he did called The Structure of the Physical Universe, edition 2. And this is primarily on atomic physics, just laying out some of the basics, and then he goes into some organic chemistry later. Then after that, he wrote the other 2 books kind of in reverse order, but in the second volume is called Basic Properties of Matter, which is on chemistry, and the third is called Universe of Motion, which is on astronomy. And all of these books kind of lay out his physical theory. He's also got books on economics, metaphysics, including philosophy, religion, dream interpretation, and other psychological subjects. And some of his followers have extended the reciprocal system into other areas as well, including crypto astroarchaeology, and things like that. So it's a very fruitful, it's an underpinning. It's something that if you understand the reciprocal system, it's a system. So if you understand how it works, you can plug it into any subject that you like. And it's, I think, fantastic because you no longer have to rely on any type of scientist to tell you anything. You can figure it out for yourself if you understand the reciprocal system. And as Larson said, he made a few mistakes, and he recognized that he was vulnerable to making mistakes, but he said that the system itself is correct. Whether I have applied the system correctly in all instances is another matter. Now, if I did make a mistake, that will become apparent over time, and hopefully that will become corrected. And to a great extent, a lot of the things that Larson maybe came up short with have been addressed by other scholars, other followers of his. Now, we are in chapter 11 of this book, just starting it, called Subatomic Particles. We just got done with a chapter on atoms. You would think that he would have that in different order, but he says that in some ways atoms are easier to understand than subatoms. But basically, with both atoms and subatoms, they are combinations of motions. You have your 4 different kinds of motion. You have your translational motion, you have your vibrational motion, you have your rotational motion, and you have your rotational vibration. But these can also occur in multiple dimensions. And all of it starts with the photon. The photon is at the basis of all of these different atoms and subatoms. The photon is a simple harmonic motion, a wave-like motion, which is the result of, in Larson's system, is the result of a translational motion in one direction and a vibrational motion in another. And when you combine them, you get a sine wave. A contribution of Dr. K.V.K. Nehru came along, where he said that the photon is the result of a birotation. 2 counter-rotating motions, when combined, also create a sine wave. So that has been an adjustment that has been made in the years since Larson died in 1990. Okay, we're going to start this chapter on subatoms, subatomic particles, right from the start. While the series of elements contains no combinations of motions with net positive displacement less than that of hydrogen 2-1-1, those three numbers, A, B, and C, are respectively the primary magnetic rotation, which is two-dimensional, the secondary magnetic rotation, which is also two-dimensional, and then the one-dimensional electric rotation, negative. And those are the numbers A, B, and C. In the case of hydrogen, you have 2, 1, -1. This does not mean that such combinations are non-existent. It merely means that they do not have sufficient speed displacement to form two complete rotating systems, and consequently do not have the properties which distinguish the rotational combinations that we call atoms. These less complex combinations of motion can be identified as subatomic particles. As is evident from the foregoing, these particles are not constituents of atoms, as seen in current scientific thought. They are structures of the same general nature as the atoms of the elements, but their net total displacement is below the minimum necessary to form the complete atomic structure. They may be characterized as incomplete atoms. The term subatomic is currently applied to these particles with the implication that the particles are or can be building blocks from which atoms are constructed. Our new findings make this sense of the term obsolete, but the name is still appropriate in the sense of a system of motions of a lower degree of complexity than atoms. It will therefore be retained in this work and applied in this modified sense. The term elementary particles must be discarded. There are no elementary particles in the sense of basic units from which other structures can be formed. A particle is smaller and less complex than an atom, but it is by no means elementary. The elementary unit is the unit of motion. The theoretical characteristics of the subatomic particles, as derived from the postulates of the reciprocal system, have been given considerable additional study since the date of the last previous publication in which they were discussed. And there has been a significant increase in the amount of information that is available with respect to these objects, including the theoretical discovery of some particles that are more complex than those described in the first edition. Furthermore, we are now in a position to examine the structure and behavior of the cosmic subatomic particles in greater depth in the later chapters. In order to facilitate the presentation of this increased volume of information, a new system of representing the dimensional distribution of the rotation has been adopted. Okay, so Larson is complicating this even more again, and it's impossible to criticize him because he's trying to come up with a new language to express new concepts. And when you are the progenitor of a language, it's not always as clear as somebody who's as a language that's had hundreds or thousands of years to congeal and to adopt and evolve. And so in this case, Larson has an entirely different but similar nomenclature, or what's the word he uses, just a way to represent subatomic particles as opposed to atoms. He uses a different notation. Okay, this means, of course, that we are now using one system of notation for the rotation of the elements and a different system to represent the rotations of the same nature when we are dealing with the particles. At first glance, this may seem to be introducing an unnecessary complication, But the truth is that as long as we want to take advantage of the convenience of using the double displacement unit in dealing with the elements, while we must use the single unit in dealing with the particles, we are necessarily employing two different systems, whether they look alike or not. In fact, lack of recognition of this difference has led to some of the confusion that we now wish to avoid. It appears, therefore, that as long as two different systems of notation are necessary for convenient handling of the data, we might as well set up a system for the particles in a manner that will best serve our purposes, including being distinctive enough to avoid confusion. Okay, so that just basically shows you that Larson is not trying to obfuscate or confuse you by this. He's trying to make something simpler. Unfortunately, if you're kind of a novice to the theory, you don't really understand it very well, it just complicates things a little bit more. It makes it more difficult to understand. I think you just have to remember that you are right now studying atomic physics. And when you study atomic physics, it's not going to be easy. You have to, apply yourself, and you have to get over yourself and, oh, this is too hard for me. Oh, you're making it even harder. Now I give up. No, you just keep going. I mean, if you want to learn atomic physics, you're going to have your ups and downs. It's going to be somewhat difficult. So it comes with the territory, and that's where we are here. The new notation used in this edition will indicate the displacements in the different dimensions, as in the first edition, and will express them in single units as before, but it will show only effective displacements and will include a letter symbol that will specifically designate the rotational base of the particle. It is necessary to take the initial non-effective rotational unit into consideration in dealing with the elements because of the characteristics of the mathematical processes that we will utilize. This is not true in the case of subatomic particles. And as long as the atomic or the double notation cannot be used in any event, we will show only the effective displacements and will precede them with either an M or C to indicate whether the rotational base of the combination is material or cosmic. This will have the added advantage of clearly indicating that the rotational values in any particular case are being expressed in the new notation. This change in the symbolic representation of the rotations and the other modifications of terminology that we are making in this edition may introduce some difficulties for those who have already become accustomed to the manner of presentation in the earlier works. It seems advisable, however, to take advantage of any opportunities for improvement in this respect that may be recognized in the present early stage of the theoretical development, as improvements of this nature will become progressively less feasible as time goes on and existing practices become resistant to change. On the new basis, the material rotational base is M0-0-0. Okay, the rotational base is basically the nullification of the progression of the natural reference system. The progression of the natural reference system is outward in all directions at the speed of light. And that, you could also think of that as anti-gravity. And that has to be nullified before you can even get started with building anything. You have to nullify the progression of the natural reference system. That takes 1 unit just to nullify that. And in some cases, 2 units. On the new basis, the material rotational base is M0-0-0. To this base may be added a unit of positive electric displacement, producing the positron, which is M0-0-1, or a unit of negative electric displacement, in which case the result is the electron, M0-0-1. The electron is a unique particle. It is the only structure constructed on a material base and therefore stable in the local environment that has an effective negative displacement. This is possible because the total rotational displacement of the electron is the sum of the initial positive magnetic unit required to neutralize the negative photon displacement, which is not shown in the structural notation, and the negative electric unit. As a two-dimensional rotation, the magnetic unit is the major component of the total rotation, even though its numerical magnitude is no greater than that of the one-dimensional electric rotation. The electron thus complies with the requirement that the net total rotation of a material particle must be positive. As brought out, it looks like we're basically out of time here. So, again, persevere here. This is difficult stuff. Just let it wash over you. No need to agree with it or disagree with it. Just say, okay, this is Larson's position. I'm trying to understand his position. And then you can figure it out later on. Okay, thanks for tuning in. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.